Well, I can think of at least three ways that the downturn has impacted capital budgeting. One is immediately after the downturn, there was a big focus on liquidity and cash management. So we saw a lot of shifting, both cutting back of capital projects and a focus on those that really minimize the use of cash or a dent in their liquidity. I think the second is that now that we're further past the immediate downturn, we are looking at probably a new normal, if you will, that the scrutiny for capital spend, that scrutiny has risen, and it will likely be with us for a long time. I don't think we're likely to go back to what we had a couple of years ago, where there was a pretty free flow of funds without so much scrutiny. That was true for many companies. Won't be true for most companies going forward. And then I think the third area is when you think about how companies grow, both through M&A acquisitions, transactions, and through capital budgeting, transactions have gone way down, and right now capital budgeting is probably the most critical area where companies are implementing their strategy and how they're making bets. So all the more focus, and as we come out of the recovery, I think we'll see more spending and more scrutiny. Well, capital projects are typically submitted by a project manager, somebody who's a stakeholder who has skin in the game and very much wants the project to fly. And they will tend to present the gold standard of their project. So what we find, there's a few disciplines that can really improve the viability of a capital project. One is a robust risk review, and bringing a big team together and seriously asking the question, how could this go wrong? So doing an identification and a quantification of the risks, that's one. But number two, we don't want to just look at the downside, we want to look at the upside. Are there ways to engineer the project, to build in growth options, ways to expand, to scale up? And if so, let's build those in at the forefront, and that can improve the ROI. And the third is a detailed process review or value stream review of the project. Are there bottlenecks? Are there redundant capacities? Is there lazy capital? Can we re-engineer this and perhaps reduce the capital spend? So risk analysis, upside identification, and a re-engineering of a value stream can improve the risk, it can improve the ROI, and potentially reduce the capital required for big projects. Well, prioritizing capital projects, really being the referee for many, many different projects coming in the door in the finance department, it's probably one of the most complex business decisions that's out there. And the projects vary tremendously. And so it's a great problem of doing the apples and oranges comparison. Most organizations don't have good tools in place to facilitate that comparison. And so what fills that void is a lot of debating, what many companies describe as a food fight. So I think one of the common mistakes is not having good tools to evaluate different kinds of project benefits, not just financial, but other strategic benefits as well. Well, I think there are several tips that we find that's very helpful, particularly in this environment. When you're managing a whole portfolio of requests. One tip is, especially for the larger projects in that portfolio, is to ask, what can you do with less? Again, often projects are submitted in the best case, the full funding gold standard. What's the silver or the bronze standard look like? What can you do with 80% or 50% of the budget? So we've done that a lot within the electric power industry, where we've asked departments to submit alternative budgets. And what's the benefit of each alternative? It's a very powerful way when you're sitting on top of that portfolio to optimize your spend across the organization. So that's one tip. I think another tip is focusing on immediate payback. In this market where people really need to demonstrate in the short term, focusing on projects that have a short payback, whether it's 6 or 12 months, and those projects that are more likely to use internal resources rather than having to expend money externally. So we did some work recently with a financial services company that was trying to make a big splash in the short term, and those were some of the tips that they used. And then I think finally is the issue of not just is it a go, no-go decision, but you want to ask, you give yourself more option if you look at what if I don't do the project and what if I defer the project. Ask 3 versions of your business case. Doing the project, deferring it a year, and not doing the project. We work with a healthcare company where they had a lot of projects, some of which could be deferred and they wouldn't be hurt. Others, if they deferred, they would lose a competitive advantage. And so they wanted to move those to the front of the line. And again, asking those 3 versions of a question, doing it, not doing it, and deferring it a year, gives the portfolio manager a lot more flexibility in how to optimize spend across the organization. We've been doing some work recently with a company in the natural extraction industry, not mining industry, and they've been doing a number of more robust capital project reviews and implementing a portfolio system. In that case, what we see is the next opportunity for them for long-term creating more value from their capital planning is through the strategic planning and forecasting process. There are many common elements across their projects. And so as they conduct these project reviews, they identify those common elements. Those also happen to be the core of what the board and the executive level are looking at in their strategic plans and their forecasting. So it's time to do a renewed look at the business forecast. What are the key drivers? What are the critical uncertainties in the business in the short and mid and long term? That blueprint of drivers, that blueprint of uncertainties should then be handed down to the portfolio manager and should drive how they run their portfolio, and it should be handed to the project manager in terms of the questions they need to address when they do a more robust business case review. I think it's now a top-down, renewed look at forecasting that senior management hands down throughout the organization.